I spent most of my 20s believing success was loud. I thought successful people drove expensive vehicles, wore expensive watches, and made sure everyone knew exactly how hard they were working. The people who posted photos from airports. The people who talked about investments over dinner. The people who never seemed to stop announcing their victories. And then I met a man named Walter. This happened years ago in a small coastal town called Harborside. I had just started working at a local equipment warehouse near the docks. It wasn't the kind of place people dreamed about. Rusted shelving. Concrete floors. The smell of oil and saltwater hanging in the air. Walter worked there part-time. He was in his 60s. He wore faded jackets, packed the same lunch every day, and drove an old pickup truck that looked older than I was. Most people barely noticed him. He didn't join conversations. He never talked about money. He never complained. If you asked me then who the least successful person in the building was, I probably would have pointed at Walter. I was wrong. One afternoon, after several months working together, we were sitting outside during lunch. I was frustrated. My friends were buying newer cars. People I graduated with were posting promotions online. Everyone seemed to be moving ahead while I felt stuck. Walter listened quietly. Then he asked me a question. How many of your goals actually belong to you? I laughed because I didn't understand. He said, sometimes we spend our lives climbing ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls. That sentence stayed with me. Several weeks later, I discovered that Walter owned multiple rental properties. He had invested carefully for decades. He had no debt. He had enough money to retire years earlier. Nobody knew. He still packed sandwiches. He still drove the old truck. And every afternoon, he left work at 3 o'clock to go fishing. That was the moment my understanding of success began to change. Most people live according to a script that someone else wrote. Go to school. Get the job. Buy the house. Upgrade the car. Keep upgrading everything. Keep showing everyone that you're upgrading. The problem isn't that these things are bad. The problem is that people often pursue them without ever asking why. Walter had written his own script. He told me that when he was younger, he watched coworkers spend decades chasing promotions they didn't enjoy so they could buy things they barely use. They worked overtime to afford bigger homes that required more overtime. They bought themselves a cage, he said. He chose differently. His goal wasn't status. His goal was freedom. One winter afternoon, I asked him why he continued working at the warehouse if he no longer needed the money. He looked out toward the harbor for a long moment before answering. Because I like having somewhere to go in the morning, he said. And I like helping people who think they still need to race. That answer surprised me. Most people imagine retirement as escape. Walter viewed it as choice. He worked because he wanted to, not because he had to. The freedom to choose had become more valuable than the money itself. Years later, I learned about something psychologists sometimes call the spotlight effect. We believe other people are paying far more attention to us than they actually are. Think about someone who buys a luxury car hoping people will admire them. The owner imagines strangers thinking, that person must be successful, but most people aren't thinking about the driver at all. They're imagining themselves in the car. The attention isn't admiration. It's projection. Walter understood this before I ever did. He once told me, if your confidence depends on strangers noticing you, you'll spend your entire life performing. That sentence hit me harder than any motivational speech. Because performing is exhausting. Many of us are carrying invisible costumes. The successful costume. The busy costume. The important costume. The wealthy costume. And every day we wake up worried that someone might realize we aren't who we're pretending to be. The quiet winners don't have that fear. They don't need an audience. I remember one evening after work when several coworkers were discussing expensive vacations, new trucks, and larger houses they hoped to buy. Everyone was comparing numbers. Walter simply listened. When someone finally asked him what he wanted next, he smiled and said, "More mornings." The room became silent. At the time, I thought it was a strange answer. Now I understand exactly what he meant. He wanted more sunrises, more coffee on the porch, more fishing trips, more conversations with his grandchildren. He wasn't collecting possessions. He was collecting moments. One of the things that surprised me most about Walter was how protective he was of his time. People asked him to work overtime. He politely declined. People invited him to events he didn't enjoy. He said no. People asked him why. He simply smiled. I remember asking him once if he worried about disappointing people. He said, "You disappoint people when you refuse to live their life for them." That changed the way I looked at boundaries. Many of us spend years explaining ourselves. We apologize for resting. We apologize for saying no. We apologize for protecting our time. But the people who quietly build meaningful lives understand something important. Time is the one currency that cannot be replaced. You can lose money and earn it again. You can lose possessions and replace them. You cannot recover a lost decade. As the years passed, I noticed something else. The loudest people often seemed the most anxious. They constantly compared themselves to others. They chased recognition. They needed approval. Meanwhile, Walter seemed completely at peace. He wasn't competing with anyone. He had already decided what enough looked like. And perhaps that is the real secret. Not becoming rich. Not becoming famous. Not becoming impressive. Simply deciding what kind of life is enough. Today, when people ask me what success looks like, I don't picture sports cars or enormous houses. I picture a quiet man sitting beside a lake on a Tuesday afternoon. No meetings. No alarms. No audience. Just freedom. Because the ultimate luxury isn't wealth. It isn't status. It isn't influence. It's ownership of your own time. The ability to wake up and decide how your day will unfold. The ability to say no. The ability to live according to your values instead of someone else's expectations. Most people spend their lives trying to look successful. The invisible winners spend their lives trying to feel successful. And the strange thing is, when you stop performing for the world, you finally begin living for yourself. So maybe the question isn't how successful you appear. Maybe the question is much simpler. If nobody could see your life, would you still want to live it exactly the same way? That answer may tell you everything you need to know.